tiny and extremely expensive college in Massachusetts called Hampshire College has removed all American flags from its campus after a recent incident in which unnamed students pulled down the flag the night before Veterans Day and set it on fire. Henceforth, says the school's president, no American flags will be flown on campus. Getting rid of the flag, he wrote, and I'm quoting, will enable us to instead focus our efforts on addressing racist, misogynistic, Islamophobic, anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, and anti-LBGQ rhetoric and behaviors. You're basically saying the flag represents evil to the extent that it shouldn't be flown.
I think that I have to recognize the fact that the wealth of my parents that was able to pay for this institution was garnered off of slavery and was taken from exploitation. The land that I live on was taken from Native peoples, and the land that I live on back in Portland, back home, was taken from Native peoples. It's the wealth of the people who've been oppressed and who've had things stolen from them that allow me to go to this institution.
But then, so why are you doing it? I mean, honestly, why are you doing it? I mean, why not go pick apples in Washington State? Why are you consuming $62,000 a year of this blood money, as you describe it, to sit around campus and do pointless rhetorical and symbolic acts like burning flags?
No, I very much disagree that symbolic, removing the flag was a not useful thing. I mean, it got me on your show, correct?
Last week, we covered the takeover of an administrative building at UC Santa Cruz by the African Black Student Alliance. We interviewed one of them on the show, live. They refused to leave until their various demands were met, and it didn't take long. The school almost immediately granted all of those demands. They agreed to paint a black affinity house on campus in the African nationalist colors. They agreed to impose mandatory diversity training on all students and gave the group veto power over the content of that training. And to the shock of administrators and nobody else, this instant capitulation did not solve the problem. It didn't go away. Now the group is making new demands. They want the school to buy a new property to, quote, serve as a low-income housing cooperative for historically disadvantaged students. In other words, cheap segregated housing open only to certain groups. They also want the school to splurge on a new Black Studies department, want another $100 grand dedicated to a specific campus diversity program. And they say if these demands are not met, they will further reclaim buildings on campus.
The University of Minnesota has a student group with one rule: no white people, period. On its website, the group Tongues Untied touted itself as a safe space targeted exclusively at LGBTQIA and or same gender-loving people of color.
Here's the lead of an actual Washington Post story. Quote, flyers saying it's okay to be white were found taped to the exterior doors of a Maryland high school Wednesday morning, apparently as part of an effort to spark racial division, unquote. Officials at Montgomery Blair High School in suburban D.C. say they ripped down those signs, called the cops, and are investigating security footage to find the monster who did it. The sentiment, it's okay to be white, is now a hate crime. Okay, so what's the correct position? That it's not okay to be white? Being white, by the way, is not something you can control. Like any ethnicity, you're born with it, which is why you shouldn't attack people for it. And yet the left does constantly, in case you haven't noticed. In a column which was published last week by the University Star, Rudy Martinez said he'd only met a dozen, quote, decent white people in his whole life, and he added this: I hate you because you shouldn't exist. You are both the dominant apparatus on the planet and the void in which all other cultures, upon meeting you, die. Rudy Martinez has not apologized for his words. We talked to him today, actually. He originally agreed to come on this show and then said he was too afraid because he was being pursued by white supremacists or something.
I don't understand why other groups won't acknowledge that violence isn't something that's exclusive to the Muslim community.
No one's saying
not
that.
Exclusive to Islam. It's not exclusive to, my religion. And so, which is Islam, but we see people being targeted in a way that's extremely unfair. And we also have this rise of white supremacists and, quote, alt-right. There are other communities that need safe spaces, which includes the LGBTQ community, the black community. I don't speak for all Muslims, and I actually am a black queer woman in addition to being a Muslim. But
you're asking for someone, not you, I guess, to pay for a safe space where people can say whatever they want. And I want examples of the kind of things that Muslims believe they could only say in a so-called safe space and could not say, for example, on this show or on a street corner. Like, what kinds of things would they be saying in these safe spaces?
I don't think it's necessarily something that they can't say elsewhere, but it's, spaces to have internal community dialogues, to be able to hash things out, to be able to have these complicated discussions.
Adam Wheeler is his name. He was born a white male. As an adult, though, he became transgender and then kept going. He now identifies as a Filipino woman. If a white man can become a Filipino woman simply by saying so, then could I become I don't know, a successful hedge fund manager or an NBA star?
Absolutely. According to Jadu, which is her name, it's what's on the inside that counts, not what's on the outside.
Is there any limit then to like the make-believe becoming real that you're describing? I mean, is there anything I can't be? If I can be a different sex, a different race, could I be a different species?
Well, if it's not hurting anyone, then what's the problem? I mean, it's very American to be who you want to be. So I think it's wonderful. I think it's beautiful. I think it's great.
Well, the Tolerance Police have a lot of power here in America, in case you haven't noticed, but they're even stronger in Canada. Just yesterday, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau delivered an official apology to gay and transgender Canadians for past state discrimination against them. But now teachers in Durham, Ontario had to attend an inclusiveness training course for the deep breath here, LGGBDTTTIQQAAPP community, which is apparently a community, that 15-letter acronym intended to encompass all sexual minorities. It may soon be required at schools. The state used to fear people deliberately spreading HIV, which remains a chronic, incurable, and ultimately terminal virus. No more, under a new law taking effect next year, deliberately spreading HIV, doing it on purpose, knowing that you're doing it, is now in California a misdemeanor with a maximum punishment of 6 months in jail. Meanwhile, there are terrible new crimes in California, and the most terrible of all, misgendering someone. Also starting next year, healthcare workers who persistently use the wrong pronouns when working with seniors could be imprisoned for up to a year.
What we have here is we have a specific demographic who generally has HIV.
I don't care what, quote, demographic you're in. If you intentionally give someone an incurable disease, I don't care how much money you give to Nancy Pelosi. You should be charged with a felony for that. That's ridiculous behavior. I mean, right? Why are we making excuses for that behavior?
Because it isn't. It's not it's not manslaughter, attempted homicide anymore, because we are keeping people alive with HIV now.
If I give you tuberculosis, which can be managed with antibiotics most of the time, like HIV, which can't always be managed, by the way, but most of the time, would that be a misdemeanor too?
Yeah, and yeah, morally speaking, why not any STD?
No, legally, because gonorrhea has never had the consequences of HIV or tuberculosis. But I mean, look, the tuberculosis sufferers don't have a lobby. That's the truth here. But as a moral question, you think it's okay, it shouldn't be a felony to intentionally give someone tuberculosis. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's wrong, just like you do, but is it a felony? Is this something that we should be putting
to give someone a potentially fake on purpose? Look, but again, just to be totally clear, this is on purpose. This is not, diseases are spread accidentally, and we understand that through recklessness or carelessness. No, this is on purpose. Like, I'm trying to give you this disease. That's not a felony.
The truth is, it's impossible to parody what actually takes place. Harvard. And I want all your viewers to look this up, because what I'm about to say will sound like we made it up, or certainly like Adam made it up. At Harvard, they announced, I think it was last week, that no longer will there be fines on your overdue library book, which is 50 cents a day, by the way, 50 cents a day, because we understand how much pressure a Harvard student already has on him or her. You don't have to pay your overdue book fine.
See that picture? It's a baby. Cute, isn't it? Well, we blurred the face to protect his identity because we've got bad news. You're looking at a bigot. According to a new pair of scientific papers, your baby is one too. Those studies say all babies are racist, even when they're just 6 months old. For real, it says that.
3 months olds are not, so they don't associate negative emotions with own race or other race individuals. And however, after about 6 months of life, the babies start to show some biases.
No.
Across the country, dazed college students are finally emerging from their safe zones into the glare of daylight with bullhorns and signs in their hands. At least 80 colleges are now staging anti-Trump protests or walkouts. One of them is at Rutgers, that's the State University of New Jersey. And joining us now, one of the protesters, organizers, Rutgers student Alex Uematsu. Alex, it's great to see you tonight. So since you're in college and you're thinking of the big things, the big ideas here, you're upset that there are undocumented students, as you say, on your campus, and you don't think President-elect Trump is sympathetic enough to them. So let's sort of pull back a little bit. Who do you think has a right to come to this country? You apparently assume that these people have a right to be on your campus taking a state-subsidized education. Who has a right to come to the United States?
I believe that everyone should be able to come to the United States. We are always and have been and are still a nation of immigrants.
Do you think people have a right to lock their doors? Or do you think they have an obligation to let anyone in who chooses to come? Well, you're saying that the United States has no right to prevent people who want to come here from coming here. And I'm just asking you, does the same apply to us as individuals? Do you have a right to keep people out who want to share your apartment with you?
I think that's not really a direct analogy. That obviously a nation state, a sovereign nation state, is very different from an individual.
Well, it belongs to its citizens, so they should be able to decide who comes in or out. Wouldn't you agree? Doesn't the country belong to its citizens?
I think that there are certain things.
I think you need to think this through, Alex.
Slavery was a democratic.
Right. Okay. Throw the slavery thing
Slavery was a democratic.
Let me just ask you this. I know that you're a liberal, a radical, lefty. I wonder if it ever occurs to you that you're maybe doing the bidding of business when you advocate for low-skilled workers to come here. Why do you think people support a lot of low-skilled labor in this country? Because it lowers wages. It lowers their labor costs. It makes them more money. Do you realize that you're part of that?
Alt-right is a neo-fascist movement, and they're trying to hide behind some softer versions of their more open counterparts who identify themselves as Nazis. But they're still part of the same movement, first of all. Second of all, when someone is trying to speak at a campus or at a rally, they're doing it not just because they have an opinion, but someone like Yiannopoulos or any other alt-righter or fascist or neo-fascist is doing it to recruit other people. No, we don't let them recruit.
You're not answering my question. That people like Milo, who you've decided are fascists, should be allowed to speak in public. You said they weren't allowed to speak at Berkeley.
He should not be allowed to speak in public to spread his racist and misogynistic and homophobic lies. No, he does not have the right to do that. You know what? In Sacramento, there were fascists who had knives tied at the ends of sticks, and they stabbed people.
College, which is supposed to be a time when you expand your horizons, when you challenge your assumptions, has never really happened for them in that way. They've had their biases confirmed and reinforced, and I think it's these students being very sheltered. You know, it's not just college. They've gone through high school, in most cases, without ever really being challenged. So their biases have been confirmed by their teachers from a very young age. When they encounter people they disagree with, they kind of lose their mind.
The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right.
That's right. Dr. Seuss has been called out as a racist. A month ago, Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis were the designated villains. Their statues were toppled, their existences purged from popular memory. But the revolution has gathered steam since then. Now, a librarian in Massachusetts has rejected First Lady Melania Trump's gift of Dr. Seuss's books, claiming the illustrations are, quote, racist caricatures.
I actually had to, once I heard the story, pull out our Dr. Seuss books that are on my children's bookshelf. You can see that there are some very stereotypical drawings of Asian Americans. Dr. Seuss was known for some very stereotypical blackface drawings.
Do you think you're leaving out some context? The Asian Americans you're talking about were the Imperial Japanese government during the Second World War, the ones who took over Asia and raped and tortured hundreds of thousands of people to death. So you think it's racist that he portrayed that government in an unflattering light? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I would imagine that if I were to draw some of the Confederate soldiers in the same kind of light that he did, despite the fact that they were treasonous, people will still find many of those caricatures, if I took their worst features and put it out there and made fun of them, they will call that racist too. So yes.
Well, the Cat in the Hat is a wonderful cat, but leftists could not be contented with that. In modern America, everything's racist, they'll say as they search for invisible traces. A wonderful cat in a hat can't be funny. He has to be mocking black people for money. And even if Dr. Seuss had no intention to do any wrong, they'll destroy his invention. You'd think that there's no way that this could be true, but for today's leftists, the limits are few. With each day's new outrage, they simmer and stew and suck in their faces until they turn blue.
Pretty much all the stuff you need to know is in Dr. Seuss.
That's all, folks.